So, Ribsy has stolen the neighbor's roast beef, and now some other dogs are coming, and they think there's going to be a fight between the dogs. Boy, a dog fight! Robert was delighted. This is going to be neat. Oh, keep quiet, oh, keep quiet, said Henry. Robert wouldn't be feeling that way if Ribsy were his dog. The sort of collie was getting closer to Ribsy, and the police dog was not far behind. Oh, poor Ribsy. Henry shut his eyes. He couldn't stand seeing Ribsy chewed to pieces. Gangway, everybody! It was Scooter's voice, leaning over his handlebars and riding his bike as fast as he could. He tore down the street behind the three dogs. He passed Henry and Robert and swerved to avoid the dogs. Caught up with Ribsy. He didn't stop for the curb, but rode right over it with a tremendous boom. Then he flung himself off the bicycle and on top of Ribsy before the dog knew what was happening. Ribsy dropped the meat and Scooter snatched it. He hopped back up on his bicycle, wheeled around in the middle of the street, and started back toward the Grumbys' house, holding the meat above his head with one hand. The three other dogs and Ribsy all chased after Scooter, barking and growling as they jumped up and tried to snap the meat. Eluding them all, that means getting away, Scooter pedaled triumphantly back down Klickitat Street. Hi, he said briefly to Henry and Robert as he passed them. Hey, give me that meat, demanded Henry. Scooter ignored him. How do you like that? Said Robert. He sure thinks he's smart. Henry ran after Scooter, who pedaled even faster. Henry put on a burst of speed. So did Scooter. So did the dogs. Henry could hear the neighbors laughing. He tried to run faster, but Scooter stayed just out of his reach. When Scooter reached the Grumbys' house, he handed the meat to Mr. Grumby. There you are, Mr. Grumby, he said. Mr. Grumby took the battered roast. Well, thank you, Scooter. That was mighty quick thinking on your part. It wasn't anything, said Scooter modestly. It was easy to catch up with him on my bike. The other dogs lost interest and ran away, but Ribsy continued to whimper and jump for the meat. Then even he gave up and sat panting, with his long pink tongue hanging out. Poor Ribsy, thought Henry. He wanted that meat so much. Maybe he's tired of the meat that I'm getting him at the dog food or at the pet store. Henry wished he dared to pet his dog, even though he'd been angry with him. He's a dumb dog, said Scooter. It's a good thing I came along and saved him from those other dogs when I did. I think you're mean, Scooter McCarthy, said Beezus. Poor Ribsy. Yeah, why don't you just go home, said Henry to Scooter. Now, children, said Mrs. Huggins. Then she said to Mrs. Grumby, you must let us buy you another roast. Henry can help pay for it out of his allowance. He knows he's supposed to keep his dog out of your yard. Gee, my mom says roasts are expensive, said Scooter. You keep quiet, Henry scowled at Scooter. Why was Scooter always around when things happened to him? Jeepers, I'm sorry, Mrs. Grumby, said Henry. I don't know what got into Ribsy. She's just hungry, I guess. He always is, observed Mrs. Huggins. Now, the meat markets were closed on Sundays in these days, but Henry knew the deli counter in the supermarket was open. Delicatessens have hot dogs, don't they? He said. I could run down to the supermarket and get some for you, if you'd like. I can go faster on my bike, said Scooter. Mrs. Grumby smiled. Thank you, Henry. That won't be necessary. I think we'll go out to dinner. She looked at Mr. Grumby, who had started toward the house with the roast. "Just between you and me," she whispered, "I don't think the meat would have been fit to eat with that recipe Mr. Grumpy was going to use on it." Then she called to her husband, "Hector, what are you going to do with the dirty piece of meat?" "I suppose he might as well have it," said Mr. Grumpy reluctantly. "Not that he deserves it." And he threw the remains of the beef to Ribsy. Mrs. Grumpy paused in the doorway. "Henry, I'm going to bake cookies tomorrow. If you'll stop by on your way home from school tomorrow, I'll give you some." "Thank you, Mrs. Grumpy," answered Henry. It seemed like she was glad Ribsy had stolen the roast. At least she wasn't angry anymore. "Here, Ribsy, it isn't time for you to eat yet." Henry tugged at the roast, but Ribsy hung on "Arr!" and growled. "Hey, come on, Dad, give me a hand." Mr. Huggins took hold of the meat, and together they got it away from Ribsy. "I'll put it in the fridge for him," said Mrs. Huggins, "and I'll have a talk with you later." "Oh, sorry," said Mr. Huggins. "Aw, gee, Dad," protested Henry. "I wasn't doing anything." "You wanted something to happen, didn't you?" said Mr. Huggins, as he carried the meat into the kitchen. Henry didn't answer. He just sighed and sat down on the steps. Why did these things always have to happen to him anyway? Robert sat down beside him, while Ramona sat on the grass beside Ribsy. Scooter picked up his bike. Beezus began practicing twirling her baton again. "That was pretty exciting, wasn't it?" asked Robert. "It isn't often something happens around here on a Sunday." "I suppose so," said Henry with no enthusiasm at all. "It was sure a good thing I caught that dog of yours when I did," boasted Scooter. Henry glared. "You think you're smart, don't you?" "Well, somebody had to stop him." Scooter threw his leg onto his bicycle. "You just wait till I get my bike," said Henry. Both boys looked interested. "Ah, you aren't going to get a bike," said Scooter. "You're just saying that." "I am too going to get a bike," insisted Henry. "And it's going to be a better bike than yours. You just wait and see." "When are you going to get it, Henry?" asked Robert. "Never mind when." Henry tried to look mysterious. "You just wait and see." You're just saying that," repeated Scooter. "He is not." Beezus flipped her baton and almost caught it before it fell in the grass. "If Henry says he's going to get a bicycle, he's going to get a bicycle. So there." "Ha!" said Scooter, and pedaled down the street. "Are you really going to get a bike?" asked Robert and Beezus at the same time, when Scooter had left. "Sure, I'm going to get one." Henry tried to sound as if he meant it. He had to get a bike now. He just had to. That was all. He'd start a bike fund right away. Of course, he had to think about paying for a new roast beef first. But with all that beef in the fridge, he wouldn't have to buy fresh meat at the Lucky Dog pet shop for a couple weeks. The money he saved on that could start his bike fund. He'd get that bike yet. And that's the end of Chapter 1. Chapter 2 is Henry Gets Rich, and we will start that tomorrow. Hope you enjoyed this. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.